The fluorescent lights of the Silver Creek Corporate Center flickered slightly as Daniel Martinez pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and most of the building's occupants had gone home hours ago. Daniel preferred it that way: the quiet, the solitude, the ability to work without anyone looking down on him or treating him like he was invisible. At 32, Daniel had worked as a janitor for almost 6 years, ever since moving to Montana from Texas with his 5-year-old daughter, Lily. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, gave him health insurance, and most importantly, had flexible hours that allowed him to be there for Lily when she got home from school. He'd been a ranch hand once back in Texas. Grew up on his grandfather's small cattle operation, learned to ride before he could properly walk, could rope a steer and mend a fence with the best of them. But when his ex-girlfriend Sarah had got pregnant and then decided motherhood wasn't for her, Daniel had made a choice. He'd followed her to Montana, hoping to keep the family together for Lily's sake. That had lasted exactly 8 months before Sarah left for good, leaving Daniel with a baby and no support system in a state he barely knew. So he'd taken the janitor job, swallowed his pride, did what he had to do for his daughter. The building housed several businesses, including the regional headquarters of Cross Creek Industries, a massive agricultural corporation that owned ranches, processing facilities, and distribution centers across 5 states. Daniel was emptying a trash can outside the executive suite when he heard raised voices from inside. He froze, debating whether to come back later when the door burst open and a man stormed out. Not just any man, Alexander Cross himself. Daniel had seen him around the building, of course. Hard to miss Alexander Cross. At 38, he was the CEO of Cross Creek Industries, having taken over the family business from his father 5 years ago. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that was always perfectly styled, sharp gray eyes, and the kind of presence that commanded attention the moment he entered a room. He wore custom suits that probably cost more than Daniel made in 3 months, drove a Tesla, had an office that took up half the top floor, and right now he looked absolutely furious. "I don't care what they think," Alexander was saying into his phone, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm not marrying Victoria Ashworth to make the board happy. I don't care if her family owns half the processing facilities in the state. I'm not doing it." He paced the hallway, not even noticing Daniel standing there with his cleaning cart. Daniel knew he should leave, give the man privacy, but he was frozen in place. "Because I'm gay, Robert. I've been gay my entire life, and I'm done pretending otherwise to make investors comfortable." Alexander's voice rose, then dropped again as he visibly tried to control himself. "No, I haven't told the board officially. Why? Because I shouldn't have to. My personal life isn't their business unless I choose to make it their business." He listened for a moment, his jaw clenching. "Tomorrow, the charity gala. Yes, I know the Ashworths will be there. Yes, I know Victoria expects an announcement. Well, she's going to be disappointed." Alexander ended the call and stood there in the empty hallway, breathing hard. That's when he finally noticed Daniel. Their eyes met, and Daniel saw the exact moment Alexander realized he'd been overheard. Panic flashed across his face, quickly replaced by the carefully controlled expression Daniel had seen him wear in the building's common areas. "How much of that did you hear?" Alexander asked, his voice carefully neutral. Daniel could lie, should probably lie, but something about the raw vulnerability he just witnessed made him tell the truth. "Enough." "I see." Alexander's shoulders slumped slightly. "You're the night janitor, Daniel, right?" Daniel was surprised he knew his name. "Yes, sir." "Are you going to?" Alexander stopped himself. "Never mind, forget I asked that. It's none of my business what you do with information that I carelessly made public." "I'm not going to say anything to anyone," Daniel said quietly. "Your personal life is your business." Alexander studied him for a long moment. "You mean that?" "Yes, sir, I do." Something in Alexander's expression shifted. He walked closer, and Daniel caught a whiff of expensive cologne, something woody and masculine. This close, Daniel could see the fine lines around Alexander's eyes, the small scar on his chin, the exhaustion beneath the polished exterior. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said suddenly. "I guess." "Are you married, dating anyone?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "No, I'm a single dad, don't really have time for dating." "But you're gay." The question should have felt invasive, but something about the way Alexander asked it, desperate, almost vulnerable, made Daniel answer honestly. Yeah, I am. Alexander's eyes lit up and Daniel saw his mind working, processing something. Then Alexander did something completely unexpected. He stepped even closer into Daniel's personal space and said, I need your help, and I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but I need you to hear me out before you say no. Okay. Tomorrow night is the Montana Agricultural Charity Gala. It's the biggest event of the year. All the major players in the agricultural industry will be there. My board members, investors, the Ashworth family who have been pushing for a merger through marriage. Alexander took a breath. I need to bring a date, a male date, someone who will make it absolutely clear that I'm not available and not interested in Victoria Ashworth or anyone like her. Daniel's mind was racing. You want to bring me to a charity gala? Yes, I'll pay you, of course. Call it a one-night consulting fee, $5,000 for 4 hours of your time. $5,000? That was more than Daniel made in 2 months. That was Lily's childcare paid for the next 6 months. That was the new winter coat she needed, the school supplies, the dentist appointment he'd been putting off. But it was also terrifying. I'm a janitor, I don't know anything about these kinds of events, I don't own a suit, I'll provide everything: suit, shoes, coaching on what to say and how to act. All you have to do is show up, pretend to be my boyfriend for a few hours, and help me send a very clear message to some people who won't take no for an answer. Daniel should say no. This was crazy. This was the kind of thing that only happened in movies, not real life, but $5,000. Why me? Daniel asked. You could hire an actor or ask an actual friend or... Because you already know my secret, Alexander interrupted. Because you had the chance to use it against me just now and you chose not to. Because something tells me you're trustworthy and right now I desperately need someone I can trust. They stood there in the fluorescent-lit hallway, the cleaning cart between them, two men from completely different worlds considering a proposal that was absolutely insane. I have a daughter, Daniel said slowly. 5 years old. Her name is Lily. She's the most important thing in my life and I can't do anything that might put my job at risk or cause problems for her. I would never ask you to, Alexander said immediately. This is one night, one event. We'll go, make an appearance, stay just long enough to make my point and then you're free to go, no strings attached. Your job is secure, I'll put that in writing if you want. $5,000? Lily's face when he told her they could finally afford those art classes she wanted. The broken heater in their apartment that he'd been trying to fix himself because he couldn't afford the repairman. Okay, Daniel heard himself say, I'll do it. Alexander's relief was visible. Thank you, truly, you have no idea how much this means to me. There's one condition though, Daniel added. Name it. If anyone asks, we don't lie about who I am or what I do. I'm not ashamed of being a janitor or a single dad. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. For the first time, Alexander smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Deal. I wouldn't want you to be anyone other than who you are. That's the whole point. They exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet the next afternoon so Alexander could take Daniel to get fitted for a suit, discussed logistics and timing. When Alexander finally left, disappearing into the private elevator that went to the executive parking garage, Daniel stood in the empty hallway and wondered what the hell he'd just agreed to. His phone buzzed, a text from Alexander. Thank you again, you may have just saved my sanity. See you tomorrow at 2 p.m., address attached. Daniel finished his shift on autopilot, his mind spinning with what he'd agreed to. When he got home at 2 a.m., he paid the babysitter, Mrs. Chen from upstairs, who always gave him a discount because she adored Lily and checked on his daughter. Lily was asleep in her narrow bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, her dark curls spread across the pillow. She looked so much like Daniel's mother that it sometimes hurt to look at her. He brushed a curl back from her face and kissed her forehead. I'm doing something crazy tomorrow night, Mija, he whispered, but it's going to help us, I promise. He went to his own room, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he was going to pretend to be the boyfriend of a billionaire CEO. Tomorrow he was going to attend some fancy gala where everyone would be richer and more educated and more sophisticated than he could ever hope to be. Tomorrow he was going to earn $5,000 for 4 hours of work. He just hoped he didn't completely humiliate himself in the process. The address Alexander had sent led Daniel to a high-end shopping district he'd only ever driven past. He'd taken the afternoon off work, technically a sick day, which made him feel guilty, and borrowed his neighbor's car after explaining he had an important appointment. He found parking 2 blocks away and walked to the address, feeling conspicuous in his worn jeans and work boots among the people in designer clothes carrying shopping bags from stores he couldn't afford to look at. The store Alexander had directed him to was called Sinclair & Sons Tailoring. The windows displayed mannequins in suits that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. He hesitated outside, seriously considering just texting Alexander that he'd changed his mind. Then his phone buzzed. "I see you outside, come in, no judgment, I promise." Daniel looked up and saw Alexander standing inside, watching him through the window. Taking a deep breath, Daniel pushed open the door. The interior smelled like leather and expensive fabric. Classical music played softly. A distinguished older man in a three-piece suit approached immediately. "Mr. Martinez, welcome, I'm Gerald Sinclair. Mr. Cross has told me we need to work some magic today." He said it warmly with no condescension, which helped Daniel relax slightly. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice, Gerald," Alexander said, shaking the tailor's hand before turning to Daniel. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "Don't be, Gerald is a miracle worker, and by the time we're done you're going to look incredible." Alexander's confidence was reassuring. "We need something classic but modern, something that fits him perfectly, and we need it by tonight." "A challenge I'm happy to accept," Gerald said. "Mr. Martinez, if you'll follow me." The next 2 hours were a blur of measurements, fabric samples, and more attention than Daniel had received in years. Gerald treated him like royalty, never once making him feel inferior or out of place. They selected a navy suit with subtle pinstripe, a crisp white shirt, a burgundy tie that Gerald insisted brought out the warmth in his complexion, and shoes that cost more than Daniel's monthly grocery budget. Alexander sat in a leather chair working on his laptop but occasionally looking up to give input. "That color's perfect on him," or "maybe try the other jacket." His attention was flattering and overwhelming in equal measure. When Daniel finally saw himself in the three-way mirror, he barely recognized the man looking back. The suit fit like it had been painted on because it essentially had been tailored specifically to his frame. He looked sophisticated, professional, like someone who belonged at a fancy gala. "Holy shit," he breathed. "Exactly," Alexander said, appearing behind him in the mirror. "You look incredible." Their eyes met in the reflection and Daniel felt a flutter of something in his chest. Attraction maybe, though that was dangerous territory. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. "We should talk about tonight," Alexander said once they'd finished at the tailor and were sitting in his Tesla. "What to expect, how to act, what to say if anyone asks about us." "Okay. First, the basics. We've been dating for 2 months. We met when you were doing some repair work in my office. True, technically, since you clean it. We connected over." He paused. "What do we have in common?" "Not much," Daniel said honestly. "You're a CEO, I'm a janitor. You wear $1,000 suits to work. I wear a uniform that says maintenance on the back. But beneath that, who are we?" Alexander pulled into a parking lot and turned to face him. "Tell me about yourself, the real you, not the janitor." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas. My grandfather raised cattle. Taught me everything about working the land. I loved it, thought I'd spend my whole life doing that kind of work." He paused. "Then life happened, Lily happened, and I had to make choices." "Do you miss it, ranch work?" "Every damn day?" The admission came out more raw than Daniel intended. "I miss being outside, working with animals, having dirt under my nails instead of cleaning solution. I miss the simplicity of it." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I grew up on a ranch too. My family's main property is outside Billings, 15,000 acres. I spent my childhood learning the business and I loved it. Thought I'd run it forever." He smiled sadly. "Then my father decided I needed to be groomed for the corporate side, sent me to business school, pushed me into the executive track. Now I spend my days in boardrooms instead of on horseback." "Do you miss it?" "Every damn day," Alexander echoed. They looked at each other and something shifted. A recognition of kindred spirits, maybe, two men who'd been forced by circumstances to become something other than what they'd dreamed of being. So that's our connection, Alexander said. We both understand ranch life. We both gave up something we loved for different reasons. That's real. That's something we can talk about authentically if anyone asks. They spent the next hour going over details. The charity the gala was supporting agricultural education for rural youth. The key people who'd be there, what to do if Victoria Ashworth or her family confronted them. How Alexander would introduce Daniel. One more thing, Alexander said as they prepared to part ways. At some point tonight, Victoria or her father or someone from my board is going to try to corner me, to pressure me about this marriage alliance they've been pushing. When that happens, I'm going to need to make it absolutely clear that I'm not available. How? Alexander hesitated. I'm going to ask you to kiss me, not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss, something that leaves no doubt about our relationship. Daniel's heart kicked into high gear. For how long? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Daniel's voice cracked slightly. That's a really long time for a kiss. I know, and I know it's a lot to ask, but I need it to be undeniable. I need them to see that I'm serious about being with you, that I'm not playing games or making a political statement, that this is real. Alexander looked uncomfortable. If it's too much, we can figure out something else. No, Daniel interrupted. I'll do it. It's part of the deal, right? I'm your fake boyfriend for the night. That includes that. Okay, Alexander looked relieved and anxious in equal measure. Thank you. After Alexander dropped him off at his car, Daniel sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, processing. Tonight he was going to attend a gala with Montana's agricultural elite. Tonight he was going to pretend to be the boyfriend of a man who could buy and sell him 1,000 times over. Tonight he was going to kiss Alexander Cross for 10 minutes in front of God and everyone. He drove home, picked up Lily from Mrs. Chen, and made dinner while she chattered about her day at kindergarten. She was so smart, so bright, so full of life. Everything he did was for her. Daddy, you look worried, Lily said, putting down her chicken nugget. I'm fine, Mija, just have something important to do tonight. Is it work? Sort of. Mrs. Chen is going to stay with you, okay? Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby. At 6 p.m., Mrs. Chen arrived. Daniel showered, styled his hair as best he could, and put on the suit that had been delivered an hour earlier. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. His phone buzzed. Car service is outside. You look great. I'll see you soon. Daniel kissed Lily goodbye, promised Mrs. Chen he wouldn't be late, and walked out to the black town car waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door for him, opened the door like he was someone important, and Daniel slid into the leather interior. As they drove toward the Billings Hotel where the gala was being held, Daniel's hands shook slightly. $5,000, he reminded himself. This is for Lily. This is to give her a better life. But as the hotel came into view, lit up against the Montana night sky, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step into a world that would change everything, and not just because of the money. The Billings Hotel was the most luxurious building Daniel had ever entered. The lobby soared 3 stories with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. People in evening wear glided through the space like they owned it, women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos, everyone dripping with wealth and confidence. Daniel felt like a fraud. The driver had let him out at the main entrance, and now he stood uncertainly in the lobby, acutely aware that his suit, no matter how well tailored, was still just a costume. He was still Daniel Martinez from South Texas, son of a ranch hand and a diner waitress, a man who cleaned toilets for a living. There you are. Daniel turned to see Alexander approaching, and his breath caught. Alexander wore a perfectly fitted tuxedo, his dark hair styled immaculately, looking every inch the powerful CEO he was. But what struck Daniel was his smile, warm and genuine, with a hint of nervousness that made him seem more human. You look incredible, Alexander said, stopping in front of him. Ready. As I'll ever be. Alexander hesitated, then took Daniel's hand. The touch sent electricity up Daniel's arm. Remember, we're just 2 people who care about each other. That's all you need to project. The rest is just theater. They walked together toward the ballroom, and as the doors opened, Daniel nearly stumbled. The space was massive, decorated in silver and gold, with round tables set for dinner and a stage where a live band played. Easily 300 people mingled, laughing and drinking champagne served by circulating waiters. Mr. Cross, a woman in a red gown, immediately descended on them. "So wonderful to see you, and who is this handsome gentleman?" "Patricia, this is Daniel Martinez, my boyfriend." "Daniel, this is Patricia Hensworth, one of our board members." The word boyfriend hung in the air. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, then her smile became fixed. "How lovely, I didn't know you were seeing anyone." "I prefer to keep my personal life private," Alexander said smoothly. "But Daniel's been incredibly supportive, so I thought it was time he met everyone." They made their way through the crowd and the pattern repeated. Alexander introduced Daniel to board members, investors, business partners. Some reacted with genuine friendliness. Others barely concealed their shock or disapproval. A few openly stared, their expressions making Daniel want to disappear. "You're doing great," Alexander murmured during a quiet moment. "Just breathe." They found their seats at a table near the front. Daniel recognized a few names from Alexander's briefing: the CEO of a major processing plant, the owner of a large ranch cooperative, a state senator. All of them gave Daniel assessing looks, clearly trying to figure out who he was and where he'd come from. "So, Daniel," the senator said as they waited for dinner to be served, "what is it you do?" Here it was, the moment Daniel had been dreading. He could feel eyes on him, people waiting to hear what made him worthy of being here with Alexander Cross. "I work maintenance at the Silver Creek Corporate Center," Daniel said evenly, "where Alexander's company has their regional headquarters." The table went quiet, someone coughed, the senator's eyebrows rose slightly. "He's being modest," Alexander interjected, his hand finding Daniel's under the table and squeezing. "Daniel grew up on a working cattle ranch in Texas. He knows more about the actual day-to-day operations of ranching than most of the people in this room, including me." "How interesting," the senator said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. Dinner was served, some fancy cut of beef that probably came from one of the ranches owned by someone in this room. Daniel focused on his food, trying to ignore the occasional glances and whispered conversations happening around them. Then she appeared. Victoria Ashworth was everything the society pages said she was: beautiful, polished, perfectly put together in a designer gown that probably cost more than Daniel's car. She approached their table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alexander," she purred, "I've been looking for you." "Victoria," Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. "This is Daniel Martinez, my boyfriend, Daniel Victoria Ashworth." Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Boyfriend, how unexpected." She turned her attention to Daniel, looking him up and down like he was a piece of meat. "And what do you do, Daniel?" "I'm a janitor." He said it deliberately, clearly meeting her eyes. Let her react, let everyone react. He wasn't going to apologize for who he was. Victoria blinked. "A janitor." "That's right." "Well," she recovered quickly, her smile turning pitying. "How noble." Alexander has always had a soft spot for charity cases. Alexander's hand tightened on Daniel's. "Daniel isn't a charity case, Victoria. He's an honest man who works hard to support his daughter, which is more than I can say for some people who have never worked a day in their lives." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria's cheeks flushed. "I see. Well, I'm sure everyone will be very interested to hear about this development. My father certainly will be." She swept away and Alexander exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry, she's even worse than I remembered." "It's fine." Daniel was surprised to find he meant it. "I've dealt with worse than rich people looking down on me. You shouldn't have to deal with it at all." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of awkward conversations and thinly veiled judgment. Daniel caught people staring, heard snippets of conversations that were clearly about him and Alexander. But Alexander never let go of his hand under the table, never once seemed embarrassed or apologetic about having Daniel there. After dinner, people began mingling again. Alexander was pulled into several conversations with business associates and Daniel stood slightly behind him, trying to look like he belonged. A few people made token efforts at conversation, asking about Texas or ranching, but most simply ignored him. Then Thomas Ashworth, Victoria's father and one of the largest investors in Cross Creek Industries, approached with two other men Daniel recognized as board members. "Alexander, we need to talk," Thomas said, not bothering with pleasantries, privately. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Daniel." "Fine." Thomas's expression was cold. "What exactly are you trying to prove with this display? Bringing some janitor to this event as your date? Are you trying to embarrass yourself, embarrass this company?" "I'm trying to live my life authentically," Alexander said, his voice tight, "something I should have done years ago. By throwing away the Ashworth partnership, by jeopardizing our business relationship over some working-class boy toy." Daniel felt rage building in his chest. But Alexander spoke before he could. "Be very careful what you say next, Thomas. Daniel is my guest and he deserves respect. More importantly, he represents something this company seems to have forgotten: real people doing real work, not just wealthy families making deals in backrooms." "You're making a mistake," one of the board members said. "The Ashworth partnership is worth millions. Victoria is not interested in me as a person," Alexander interrupted. "She's interested in my name, my money, my company. That's not a partnership, that's a business transaction, and I'm not for sale." Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice but not enough to keep Daniel from hearing. "You're gay, fine, we'll work around it. Find you some discreet situation, someone appropriate who understands how these things work. But this," he gestured at Daniel dismissively, "this is beneath you, beneath this company." Alexander's entire body tensed. "Get out." "Excuse me." "You heard me, get out. You're no longer welcome at this event, or at any event associated with Cross Creek Industries." "You can't." "I absolutely can, and if you continue to disrespect Daniel, I'll personally make sure every business owner in this state knows exactly what kind of man Thomas Ashworth really is." Alexander's voice was ice. "Now leave." Thomas stared at Alexander for a long moment, then turned and stalked away, the board members following. The confrontation had drawn attention. People were watching, whispering. Alexander stood there, breathing hard, his hand clenched in a fist. Then he turned to Daniel. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to pretend to kiss me right now in front of everyone. Show them that this is real, that I'm serious, that I'm not backing down." Alexander's eyes were intense, almost desperate. "Can you do that?" Daniel's heart pounded. This was it, the moment Alexander had warned him about. The 10-minute kiss that would seal the performance. All around them people were watching, waiting, judging. Daniel thought about Thomas Ashworth's contempt, about Victoria's pitying smile, about all the people in this room who'd looked at him like he was nothing, like he didn't belong, like he was beneath them. Then he thought about Alexander defending him, about the way Alexander had held his hand through dinner, about the genuine respect in Alexander's eyes when he looked at Daniel despite all their differences. "Yes," Daniel said, "I can do that." "Thank you," Alexander breathed. Then, in front of 300 of Montana's agricultural elite, Daniel Martinez stepped forward, cupped Alexander Cross's face in his hands and kissed him. The first touch of their lips was electric. Daniel had meant to keep it simple, a quick kiss, enough to make the point, professional and detached. But the moment their mouths met, something shifted. Alexander's hand came up to the back of Daniel's neck, pulling him closer, and Daniel found himself responding without thinking. The kiss deepened. Alexander tasted like champagne and mint, and his lips were surprisingly soft against Daniel's. Around them, Daniel was vaguely aware of gasps, murmurs, the rustle of people shifting and staring. But it all faded into background noise as Alexander's other hand settled on Daniel's waist, steadying him. This was supposed to be fake, a performance, but the way Alexander was kissing him felt achingly real. When they finally broke apart, probably only 30 seconds, not nearly the 10 minutes Alexander had mentioned, they were both breathing hard. Alexander's pupils were dilated, his carefully styled hair slightly mussed where Daniel's fingers had run through it. "That was," Alexander started, then seemed to lose his words. "Yeah," Daniel managed. Around them, the crowd had erupted in whispers. Some people looked shocked, others disgusted, a few genuinely pleased. Victoria Ashworth had disappeared entirely. The board members who'd confronted them earlier were clustered in a corner, talking urgently. We should probably leave, Alexander said quietly, before this gets worse. Okay. But before they could move, an older woman approached. She was probably in her 70s, elegant in a silver gown with kind eyes and a warm smile. Alexander Cross, she said, your father would be proud of you. Alexander blinked, clearly surprised. Mrs. Henderson, I didn't know you were here. I wouldn't miss this event for anything. Agricultural education was always close to my heart. She turned to Daniel, extending her hand. And you must be the young man who's captured our Alexander's heart. I'm Margaret Henderson. My late husband ran Cross Creek's operations for 30 years before he passed. Daniel Martinez, ma'am. He shook her hand, grateful for her genuine warmth. I saw what Thomas Ashworth said to you, Margaret continued, her voice dropping slightly. And I want you to know that not everyone here shares his narrow views. What you and Alexander showed just now, that was courage, real courage. Thank you, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. Now go, Margaret said with a wink. Before the vultures descend, you've made your point beautifully. They made their exit quickly, Alexander texting his driver while they navigated through the lobby. Once they were outside in the cool Montana night, Daniel felt like he could breathe again. The town car pulled up and they climbed inside. As soon as the door closed, Alexander slumped back against the seat. I'm so sorry, he said immediately. I'm sorry you had to hear those things. I'm sorry I put you in that position. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, Daniel interrupted. I knew what I was signing up for, well, mostly. He managed a small smile, though Thomas Ashworth was even more of an asshole than I expected. Alexander laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. He really was, wasn't he? He turned to look at Daniel. You were incredible in there, the way you stood your ground, refused to be ashamed of who you are, that took guts. So did defending me, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Alexander's voice was fierce. Nobody gets to talk about you that way, nobody. They sat in silence for a moment, the car gliding through the city streets. Daniel's lips still tingled from the kiss. His heart was still racing. This was supposed to be a simple business transaction, 4 hours of his time for $5,000. But sitting here now with Alexander looking at him like that, Daniel realized it had become something more complicated. Where should I have the driver take you? Alexander asked. Daniel hesitated. I don't want to go home yet. Is that weird? I feel like I'm still coming down from all that adrenaline. Alexander smiled. I know exactly what you mean. Want to go somewhere quiet, get some coffee, decompress. Yeah, that sounds good. Alexander gave the driver an address. And 20 minutes later they pulled up to a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place Daniel actually frequented, vinyl booths, checkered floors, a neon sign that flickered slightly. This is your idea of somewhere quiet? Daniel asked, surprised. My father used to bring me here when I was a kid, Alexander said. Before he became obsessed with building the empire back when he was just a rancher trying to make a living. We'd come here for breakfast before heading out to check cattle. I haven't been back in years, but I've been thinking about it lately. They went inside and found a booth in the back corner. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes, brought them coffee without asking. Didn't think I'd see you again, Alexander Cross, she said warmly, though you've certainly moved up in the world. Hi, Betty, it's good to see you. Alexander introduced Daniel and Betty gave them both knowing looks before retreating. They ordered pie apple for Daniel, cherry for Alexander, and sat there in the fluorescent light, still in their formal wear, completely out of place and yet somehow more comfortable than they'd been all night. Can I ask you something? Daniel said after a while. Anything. That kiss, was it? Daniel struggled for words. Was it just for show, or did it feel different to you too? Alexander set down his fork slowly. It felt different. Yes. Yeah, Alexander met his eyes. Daniel, I need to be honest with you. When I asked you to do this tonight, it really was supposed to be just a business arrangement. A way to make a point to people who wouldn't listen otherwise, but somewhere between picking you up and that kiss, something changed. Daniel's heart was pounding again. What changed? I started actually liking you, not as a convenient solution to my problem, but as a person. You're genuine in a way I'm not used to. You don't care about my money or my position. You're just real. Alexander looked vulnerable in a way Daniel had never seen. Thanks for watching.